Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a new installment of Black and Beautiful Chit Chat Connections. It is Charlene. I am back with you, and we are talking about something that, as everyone knows, could be really, really triggering for some people. So tonight we're going to put on our scuba gear. Like it is the inevitable. We are talking intrinsic racism. Ooh, the word racism. Why is it so taboo in our society to use the word racism? Because a lot of people don't want to be called a racist. But tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to explore this lens. What is intrinsic racism? How does racism play out in our society? And how can you, as an empowered individual who understands the lens, utilize this knowledge to ensure that you are not inflicting harm on others? That is the whole basis of Black and Beautiful Chit Chat Connections. How do we reduce harm? How do we use knowledge to reduce harm? I'm so happy to be with you guys again. I wanted to try something a little new today. Look at our setup. I have a PowerPoint. You see me in the corner. I'm going to be narrating this PowerPoint. We're not going to spend too much time today. I don't want to have a long, drawn out session, but at the end of the day, I do want us to walk away with something. And so a concern came to me. The title of this podcast is Black and Beautiful Chit Chat Connections. Most allies are like, I don't think you want allies in the room. I said, no, we need our allies in the room. We need our folks who are looking for that additional information, who want to explore, who want to engage in healthy, healing dialogue with people to come and join us. So for my white folks out there, if you are interested in learning more about intrinsic racism, tap in, watch this entire podcast, learn some things, do some extra exploration. For my people of color, my BIPOC community, my LGBTQ plus community, my accessibility community, join in, tap in with us, because a lot of these lenses affect, other historically ignored groups in America. So we want to understand the lens so we can apply it and be better individuals in society. So I want to do a shameless plug. Look in our link, in the description box below. You'll see our link tree. You can click on our link tree and pick your poison. Some people love IG, some people love Facebook, some people love Twitter. If you are one of those people, go ahead and follow us at imanaborenainc. And we have learning sessions on Instagram. We are very, very active on there. We're very active on Twitter. We're looking to gain some more followers. It seems to be really hard to gain some followers on Twitter. I feel like I gotta beg for followers on Twitter. So if you are popping on Twitter and you'd like to retweet one of our tweets, go ahead and do so. Support the podcast. We're here for righteousness and equity. So guys, I want to thank all of the guests that I've had previously. Last week, we had Vidal Rashad on our show talking about power. Our episode was Fight the Power. Man, was it powerful. We were able to see how power plays out in society. Once again, all of these different terms that we're using on this podcast, the way we're laying this foundation is for us to explore how this applies to society. How can we be better individuals engaging in righteousness and equity? So shout out to Vidal Holloway. Thank you for being on our platform. Thank you for gracing us with your knowledge or your insight. We've also had Anthony Harrison, Esquire, on his way to law school, talking to us about networking and BIPOC networks and what that looks like to leverage them. So like I said, take some time, go back, watch the other videos, because we are laying a foundation. If this is your first time engaging with Imana Borena, please know that we are a consulting firm. We do DEI work. We go into organizations, we train, we provide feedback, we provide a comprehensive plan, 1 year, 2 year, 5 years. What does it look like to make your workspace more equitable and inclusive for everyone? That is our goal. We also have professional coaching services. So if you are an individual or your HR department has professional development opportunities, tap into www.imanaborenainc.org. We have professional development opportunities, one-on-one coaching. We have some webinars coming your way, and we also have an e-course coming your way, guys. Yes, an e-course. We are working on a lot of stuff so that you can start engaging at your own pace, not only on our free YouTube platform, but also for a small fee on our website. And we also provide college access and success free services for our young people interested in higher education. I come from a higher education background. I know how important it is for us to empower our young people to understand the systems and structures so they can not only thrive through their undergraduate, graduate, PhD programs, but they can be effective beneficiaries to their communities once they go back and pump that information. So that's our goal, Imana Borena Inc. And you can find us at www.imanaborena.org or Google us. We're on Google, guys. I'm just really excited. We're building this platform. And so today I'm taking a little different approach. Today, we're going to have some visuals because intrinsic racism, like I said, can be very triggering for some people. So I want us to tap in, but I don't want us to put our emotions before the knowledge, right? We're looking at facts. Today, we're going to put on our scuba gear into truth. We're going to speak truth to power like we did last week. We're going to talk about the truth behind these terms, the truth about why people utilize racism and its definition to define how people are treated in America, right? I'm specific to America because this is where I reside, but I look forward to engaging with my DEI professionals all over the world because I know there's a lot going on in the UK right now in terms of DEI, and a lot of people are really, really, really trying their best to bring awareness to this global, phenomena, for lack of a better term, of how people are really being treated poorly. And we want to do better as a society, especially post this pandemic, as we start to move into a new space in society. It's best that we take advantage of this time. So I thank you guys for tuning in. Tonight is Intrinsic Racism. Like my favorite minister, Minister Kevin L.A. Ewing. He says, put on your scuba gear. Tonight, we're popping off. Scuba gear better be on. We're going to look at the coral reefs. We're getting off the boat, and we're in the water, guys. All right, so as we jump in, Intrinsic Racism, presented to you by Imana Borena Inc., Black and Beautiful Chit Chat Connections, a podcast. So we're going to go into racism. All right, we're going to define what racism is as we start to develop our lens in terms of what intrinsic racism is. So racism is prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or marginalized. So when I say historically ignored communities or historically ignored groups, that falls under this as well, right? So antagonism, discrimination, prejudice, bias against people on the basis of their membership to a particular racial, ethnic, or minoritized or marginalized or ignored group, right? It's the belief that different races possess distinct characteristics, abilities, or qualities, especially so as to distinguish them as inferior or superior to one another. Now, this is the crux of America, right? We know that in America, we have been socialized to believe that whiteness is superior to Blackness. And we use Blackness as an umbrella term for BIPOC communities and people who navigate as people of color, who are presenting, Black presenting, people of color presenting. I do not look white. I'm not white passing. I don't know if you guys have ever heard that term, white passing, or the paper bag test. Things that make, racism in this country continue to thrive are the ways in which we engage in those type of ideologies, right? The paper bag test in the Black community saying if you are darker than the paper bag, you couldn't be a part of the Black community. Or the white passing test, in the white community, that if you look more European or Eurocentric, you can navigate through whiteness more easily because it's more comfortable for white folks, right? So we want to combat these ideologies because these are socializations. These are indoctrinations to ensure that systemic structures continue to oppress and depress communities at the benefit of one group or another, right? So we want to combat these things. And I know that it sounds shocking to some people, like, whoa, that's really racism? Because technically, some of us have engaged in these types of behaviors over and over again, thinking that it's okay. And today, imanaborenainc and Charlene, me, I'd like to challenge you in that thought process, challenge you to see outside of the norm of what you believe, is okay. These behaviors are no longer okay. And the little side tangent, I am on the East Coast right now, and it's really, really chilly over here. It's a rainy day, so I put on my thick sweater and my coffee, and I'm nice and cozy. And so, 8 p.m. at night is usually a cozy time. So I want you to put on your comfortable PJs, grab a cup of tea or whatever you love, a glass of wine, whatever it is that's your vice, and tap in with me, guys. Tap in with me. Stay with me, and let's continue on this journey. I'm going to take a sip of coffee. Actually, not coffee. I started to drink cocoa. What is it called? Cocoa powder. It's supposed to be a superfood and really good for your body. So I mixed it in some water, and it's been the substitute for my coffee lately. So I don't know. Shout out to Minister Kevin for recommending that as well. I always want to give credit where credit is due. At the end of this presentation, there will be a resources page. There will be a resources page coming to our website. So anything that you see on this podcast, you'll be able to go to our website and tap into so that you can do your additional research. And that's the goal. That's our goal. So from racism, right, since we know it's a belief that different races possess distinct characteristics, abilities, or qualities, especially so as to distinguish them as inferior or superior to one another, we have something called racialism. And Kwame Anthony Appiah is a professor at Yale, Cornell, Duke, and Harvard. He's a philosopher and a cultural theorist. And his interest, I have a typo. Oh my goodness, Charlene. Guys, how come no one told me? That was an inside joke. Excuse my typos. His interests include political and moral theory. So we're thinking about political and moral theory, and we're thinking about racism, and we're thinking about racialism. Remember I said we've been indoctrinated and socialized into this racism lens, right? To benefit a group of people in a system that they created to oppress others. And racialism, right? I'm going to read this, and I know that you can see it. You have access. You can pause. You can forward. You can fast forward. You can rewind. But I'm going to read through this because I want us to really break this down. So there are heritable characteristics, right? Racialism believes that there are heritable characteristics possessed by members of our species that allows us to divide them into small sets of races in such a way that all the members of these races share certain traits and tendencies, with each other that they do not share with members of any other race. And these traits and tendencies, characteristic of a race, constitute, on the realist view, a sort of racial essence, they believe. And it's a part of the content, of racialism that the essential heritable characteristics account for more than the visible morphological characteristics, which are skin color, hair type, facial features, on the basis of which we make our informal classifications. This is why I want us to put on our scuba gear, because this is very deep. And to break this down into layman's terms, Kwame Anthony Appiah, is begging the question that racialism is a social construct that allowed for elites, right, or those who were creating the system and had the power at the time, to create this ideology that questions the racial essence of an individual, not based on their ethnicity or their culture or the region of the world that they came from, but that their morphological characteristics are synonymous with their racial essence and their heritable characteristics. And what that did was that allowed for those who had the power to then dictate what those racial characteristics were, what that essence, that racial essence is. It's essentially, and I know I know that some people might be like, no, I don't believe this. This is too much. But this is where systemic structures of racism are birthed. Now, I'm not going to go into the history of this because we can prove that this happened. I'm just going over the term and laying a little bit of foundation. We will go into the history of this in a later podcast. But I want to just sit a little bit in understanding the terminology and the ideologies behind it. So these heritable characteristics, right, were created, and they are synonymous with someone's morphological characteristics, like me, my skin color, my hair type, my facial features, right? And if we create these characteristics as the group in power, we can create a society where people make informal classifications based on these characteristics. So as a society, I know you guys have heard of racial stereotypes. This is the birth of racial stereotypes. Anthony Appiah is begging the question that are racial stereotypes real, or were they socialized and constructed by an elite group of people who had power to create a system in a moment? So that brings me to what a racialist's behaviors and characteristics look like, right? So a racialist is one who maintains that people who appear similar on the basis of certain inherited physical characteristics, such as skin color, hair type, facial features, share a distinctive racial essence that is responsible for a range of psychological and behavioral traits and tendencies. So I gave you the layman's terms, and Kwame Anthony Appiah was able to continue with the explanation of what racialism is, right? So you would ask, what are these psychological and behavioral traits and tendencies? And we're going to get into that. We're going to talk more about what that is. Falsehood. Appiah believes that racialism is a false doctrine, but racialism is a presupposition of other doctrines that have been called racism. That's very, very deep. Like I said, putting on our SCUBBA gear. So if I had to explain this to a child, right? I wouldn't explain racialism to a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old. I say a child 13, 14, 15, they're exploring, they're learning history, they're learning the origins of this country, and they're asking, well, I heard this term racialism, and someone said it wasn't real. So what does that mean? So Appiah is once again begging the question that racialism can be defined as a term because of other doctrines that have been called racism. And those other doctrines that have been called racism, we're going to explore as well. And those doctrines paved the way, right? Like I said, there had to have been a group of people who held power, wanted to create a structure, wanted to create a system, but had to create a way for oppression. And that way for oppression was by dividing people into subcategories and then aligning certain racial stereotypes or characteristics with them to ensure that just by their inherent look, their hair type, their color, just their skin color, just the way that they look physically can be aligned and synonymous with these characteristics that were developed by them. And they called it that racial essence. every time I go deep, every time I think about these things, I'm just like, we can see that perpetuated in society today. I mean, I don't want to get ahead of myself because I get so excited about this, but guys, getting followed around the Bloomingdale store as a person of color, right? Automatically people thinking just because you're Black or just because you're Latino or just because you're a person of color, you want to steal something. You could be a millionaire. Oprah was mistreated. A billionaire mistreated. And Neiman Marcus. What? Because of the color of her skin. Because the racial narrative and the racial essence that is synonymous with her exterior, right, dictated how people were to treat her. The racialism that she experienced, the indoctrination of people believing in racial stereotypes and believing that they're real. And that is what I want to discuss today. This is why I chose intrinsic racism as our next topic, because I want us to discuss, we have to combat the social indoctrination that we've all engaged in to believe that one race of people is superior, the other race is inferior, racial stereotypes that have nothing, that are generalized and are just very unfair and disgusting, if I must say so. We need to move away from that and combat that. And that actually is how we address bias. I think we have to get to racism and understand racism as a lens before we can start addressing our biases, before we can start addressing our microaggressions, because the catalyst to our microaggressions and our biases is our racialization, our indoctrination of these racial essences and characteristics that were created to ensure people are oppressed in this country, to ensure that people are placed in boxes. These ideologies and indoctrinations are a result of the global slave trade. Now, like I said, we'll go into history later on at a later episode, so I just want to lay the foundation. But historical context is the global slave trade, and as a result, we have to create these racial narratives that are false and these indoctrinations that are false, so we can ensure that these group of people are used as our economic mobility. Because don't forget, human flesh was being traded for monetary value. So, Appiah believes that racialism is a false doctrine, and it is a presupposition, excuse me, guys, of other doctrines that have been called racism. And this is where we get into intrinsic and extrinsic racism. So, that's what my nephew would say. So, Auntie Charlie. So, Auntie Charlene, what's next? Extrinsic racism. So we're building upon the falsehood of racialization, knowing that it's an indoctrination, right? And it's a way to socialize people into believing that one group of people is superior to another, and or based on your external presentation, there's a racial essence that comes with you and you are predisposed to certain characteristics. We know that that's what we're building on. So the doctrines that Appiah is discussing that created this racialization or this socialization, one is extrinsic racism. And this is the belief that racial essences entail certain morally relevant qualities. And it goes beyond racialism, right? So the extrinsic racist believes that the differences between racial groups warrant differential treatment. And so an example of that is that an extrinsic racist will treat Black and white people differently based on the belief that they believe white people are honest and all Black people are dishonest. So once again, the Oprah example. Oprah's a billionaire. She walked into Neiman Marcus and they mistreated her in Neiman Marcus. She could have bought the whole store if she wanted to. She has her own television network. She has her own magazine. She had at the time her own television show. This woman she did not need to steal a thing out of Neiman Marcus. But because of the way that she externally presents and because of the racial essence that has been indoctrinated in our society, even though she is well capable of purchasing whatever she wants at Neiman Marcus, they still believe that she was either a thief or didn't deserve the respect because Black people don't have, and we don't have to serve a Black person because they don't have enough to be in Neiman Marcus. They're not equipped enough to be in Neiman Marcus. To take it a step further, I'd like to explore the media. This is something we talk about a lot in the media. Young white men who, sold drugs, murdered somebody, whatever it is. Let's take, for example, the cadre of young white men who have harmed Black folks in their justice-filled, because I can't think of the words that could justify any of their actions. This is why I'm struggling. So we're going to use, for example, the young white man who went into a church and started shooting up the church. Like the church folk have anything to do with his hatred. The captain of the police department took him to Burger King on the way to the jail. And forgive me for not remembering this young man's name, but I think he was recently in the news. And drop it in the comments, drop his name in the comments if you remember who this young man is. And I'm just going to use young man because I'm going to use respect across the board for both white and Black folks. I want to model the behavior. So this young man shot up a church, killing people, taking people from their families, and the chief of the police department took him to Burger King and fed him before he took him to jail. What do you think that meant? That meant a thank you. So happy you killed those Black people. Now, in tandem with that, when you read the media and the news, they described him as a troubled youth, a young man who made mistakes, someone who needed additional mental health services, all the excuses in the world for his actions because he's a young white man in society, and young white men can make mistakes and bounce back from their mistakes. Now take, for example, George Floyd. And I use George Floyd, and I'm not trying to use him as a martyr, but I have to use him because he's like an Emmett Till of our time. It's the most significant occurrence that I could use to illustrate the juxtapose I'm trying to share with you. So we have this young white man who shoots up a church. He's seen as a troubled youth. And then we have this young Black man who gets a knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds that was recorded as he screamed out for his mother. And the first thing the news could say is that he was a drug dealer, he was a criminal, he was XYZ and then some. All of these negative racial stereotypes. But in that moment, he was being murdered by a police officer, as if to justify the behavior. Right? We're not seeing the same. And anybody who can't see that and legit just sit with that and say, you know what, that's right. That's true. I've seen that. Do your own research. The media is an issue when it comes to how they depict people of color. Or, for example, anytime a crime happens in my area and I look on the news If there's no face to the crime, I know it's a white person that perhaps committed that crime. But a young black or brown male, they're plastering their face everywhere. They even have billboards in my area where I live where they put the criminals on the billboards. And 90% of the criminals on the billboards are black. Some people might say, oh, because black people commit crimes. I'd beg to ask the question, if they just chose not to put those white people up there who commit crimes as well. Criminals are criminals. There is no racial essence that says black folks are criminals, brown folks are criminals, and white folks just make mistakes. That's false. It's a false narrative. And this is what Apaya is trying to get us to understand in an academic sense, for us to have an opportunity to have dialogue about these things. And so I don't want people to be triggered by this in a sense that you shut down, you turn the video off. I want you to push through with me, like push through the discomfort, because the discomfort is not only for white folks. People of color, people who come from historically ignored communities are uncomfortable with this as well, because extrinsic racism is perpetuated in communities of color too. As my friend Vidal said, all skin folk and kinfolk. That is a response to extrinsic racism in our own communities. So we're all battling this just from different angles. And so that's why I want you to push through this, push through the discomfort, and go on this journey with me. So the next term that we're going to go into is the name of our podcast today. Intrinsic racism, the belief that each race has a moral status quite dependent of the moral characteristics entailed by its racial essence. An intrinsic racist holds that the bare fact of being the same race is a reason for preferring one person to another. In other words, an intrinsic racist maintains that people of a racial group X are inherently morally inferior to racial group X. So let me give you an example. Black Lives Matter, right? Me saying Black Lives Matter triggers someone, and they say all lives matter. Because in their mind, right, white supremacy is their lens. So if Black Lives Matter, thus there's Black supremacy. But that is incorrect. That is an incorrect thinking. What Black Lives Matter means is that within the system of white supremacy, we have to understand that there are Black lives being harmed. Black lives as the word to encompass underrepresented groups, marginalized groups, those who are seen as racially inferior in this country. It does not mean supremacy. But we have to understand where these ideologies are coming from if we want to combat it, right? So I know that some people just don't want to get with that. They feel like they're going to give up privilege. They feel like they're going to give up all of the amazing things that they have in their lives. And now they're going to have to give it to people who don't deserve it. And it's like, no one's asking you to do that. People are asking you to be a decent human being. There's enough to go around in this country. The state of California makes more money independently than all of the other states combined in this country. There's enough to go around, and there are enough resources. That scarcity of resources, that stratification of resources is also an ideology that we will discuss in a later podcast. But I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of what racism and the socialism of racism came from, the indoctrination of racism, the terms and what they mean, and how we can use them to apply to our own personal journeys so that we can do a better job supporting one another in this diversity, equity, and inclusion work. Justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Jedi and B. Because I do want everybody to understand that my platform is very, very specific to Jedi work. So if you come on here and you're in the comments and you're being nasty, we're not responding to that because we're only going to respond to people who want to go on this journey, people who want to understand how they can be a better individual in society, how can they be a better coworker, a better friend, a better teammate, and how can they create systems and structures in their own scopes of work that ensure that equity and inclusion and righteousness are at the forefront of their policies and procedures. That's what this platform is for. So we talked about racism. We talked about racialization. We talked about it's falsehood, the falsehood of racialization and how that was an indoctrination to ensure a system can flow that was a result of the global slave trade. We talked about the doctrines that were the catalyst to racialization, and those doctrines being extrinsic and intrinsic racism. I also want to say that we can talk about extrinsic and intrinsic racism as if they are independent lenses, but they're not. They can overlap. And as we can see, the encompassing of that is the word racism. They overlap because sometimes you could be someone who maintains that, one group is inherently morally inferior. And then sometimes you can be that person who just has that affinity and thinks that all white folks are more honest and all Black folks are dishonest, or people are criminal, or you subscribe to this indoctrination of racial essence, this indoctrination of racial stereotypes. I want you to unsubscribe. I want you to subscribe to this podcast and unsubscribe to that ideology. Okay? So, it's story time, guys. It's story time because we're almost done. So, I wanted to share 2 stories with you guys. And these stories, to me, can help us critically think through what we learned today and the experiences of people. If you go on my LinkedIn, you will see I'm always saying we're having a human experience. Everybody's having a human experience. We need to understand and humanize the experiences of others. And if we really want to be champions of Jedi, if we really want to be at the forefront of what the next phase of our society looks like as the new leaders coming up, we need to ensure that we're giving people practical ways to apply this information. And so I'm going to go with story time because this is a podcast and I'm not in a formal training with you where I would put you through an activity and make you talk to each other and have us really go in. But today I'm just going to give you story time. So I have a student whom I just absolutely adore. I have hundreds of students, thousands of students. I have thousands of students that I've worked with over the years. And the one thing that I tell my young people is that even though I'm not in the position, that at that particular school anymore, or that particular organization, it doesn't mean that we can't have a relationship. So a lot of my relationships with my students have evolved into like a mentorship or a friendship. And we talk to each other and they call me, like they literally say, like, I had a student call me from Jamaica, for goodness sakes, on his birthday. Just like, hey, Miss Shar, I was thinking about you and I just wanted to talk to you and talk about my future goals. Like, those are the types of things that I love. Like, and I have a student now who's pregnant and she's like, will you be my godmom, my child's godmom? I'm just like, the relationships that I have with my young people are very, very special to me. But most importantly, I look at them as family, right? They reflect me. What I see in myself, I see in them. And it's not exclusive, mutually exclusive to them being students of color, because I have students from all over the world. And I have, students who identify in many different intersections of their identities. And so what I see in them is the ability to be leaders of tomorrow. And I see that and I want to foster that and I want to, help that grow. So excuse me, I got too close and I got, really, really excited. But a student called me recently and, this particular individual is in Chicago working at a local nonprofit that is supposed to provide access to professionals of color who want to become teachers so that they can go and work in the inner city and there can be representation in inner city schools in Chicago. And so the city of Chicago. And so this individual called me and said, hey, 2 months ago, I was on the bus and I was on my way home and I had on my hoodie and my headphones and I was walking. I got off the bus and the car, all of a sudden, I just feel somebody grab me and put my arms behind me and push me up against the wall. And when I turn around, it's a cop. And so I asked them, can I take my headphones off? And they say, yeah. And they search me, they search my bag, and I'm asking them, why are you searching me? And they told me nothing. And after they finished searching me, they were like, all right, we're done. Do you need a note? And this particular individual was like, a note? What are you, a doctor's office? A note to where? No, thank you. He put on his hoodie, put his headphones on, and kept walking. Now, I know everybody probably just thought about Trayvon Martin or every other young person of color who wears, I wear hoodies. I'm not even young anymore. I'm old and seasoned, child. I'm like Larry seasoning salt. But I even wear hoodies sometimes or a hat, or I put my hood up and I got my headphones on. So I say all that to say, this young person didn't even tell his mom that happened. In fear of her fear. And when I acknowledged and validated that was so wrong, and I said, I wish I could just hug you right now. That student said to me, you know what? I think I need a hug too. That would feel really, really nice. Because this particular individual had been walking around with this trauma. And he went further to explain that while he was at work, he wasn't interested in work. He wasn't interested in engaging because he had just experienced something so trauma-filled that he couldn't even talk to anyone about it. And his managers came to him and said, your energy is really low. We really need your energy to come up. We need, not even knowing that this particular individual had experienced this, being violated and searched for no reason without any explanation. We need to understand that these things are happening every single day to your young children, your friends' young children, all my white folks out there who are allies, who, champion Jedi work, or you're going on this journey with me. Please understand that this is the life and plight of someone of color in this country, in particular, our young Black and brown boys. And their parents feel helpless. What do we tell our children in that moment? Another story time. A college I used to work at. I left the college, stopped working there. I still had a connection with the students. The students wanted to protest. Now, everyone around the country knows that when our young people to go to college, that's where you find your voice. Like, for example, Smith, right? That's where all the empowered girls go to go and get their voice and become the leaders of tomorrow. Or Howard, you go to Howard, you get your identity affirmed, and you go travel the world and you become the leaders of tomorrow. So they were at this school and they wanted to be the leaders of tomorrow, and they wanted their voices to be heard because, quite frankly, their experiences were very violent at this school. And when I say violent, I mean from professors, the marginalization, the underrepresentation, how they navigated in the classroom, the things that were being said. I even had a professor call me crying and say they refused to talk to this young Black man because they don't feel comfortable talking to them and I need to be some mediator. I mean, things were happening at these colleges, and these things are happening all over the country. So I digress. This group of students wanted to protest. One of the leaders of this group called me and said that the president and 2 vice presidents in the cabinet brought them into the president's office and threatened them with the police. That if they were to protest, they would be arrested. At that very same institution, I worked very closely with a young lady who was raped on campus by an affluent white boy, white young man. And no charges were brought against him, nor was an investigation done. Young lady went into depression, had to drop out of school. I mean, the stories go on and on. And in order for us to properly address the harm that we are inflicting on our young people, because at this point, the older people know how to survive through it. And most of the time, we try to survive the best way that we can. So if you see someone at a bar having a drink, hey, man, they might need that drink. Work might have been very hard. And that goes for anybody. But when we're talking about truly doing Jedi work and truly assessing systemic oppression and truly assessing how racism and bias and microaggressions show up in the classroom, show up in the way that we talk to each other, show up in the way that we interact, the ecosystem is fueled by this racialism, this ideology of racialism. If we don't understand that at its crux, we are not doing our due diligence as Jedi professionals. We are not. And so I'm here to implore you to continue in your journey of researching and understanding the ins and outs. I'm using young people as an example, but I can use myself as an example. Intrinsic and extrinsic racism shows up every single day for me. I recently was gaslit by someone who tried to bully me and make it seem as though I had stopped their ability to do their job when they were taking up so much space and didn't even recognize how much space they were taking up. Just wanted more and more territory. It's just, we endure it every single day. And as people of color, I am not here to beg white people to understand. I'm here to get white folks to understand where their power lies. You as a white person feel empowered by this information. Wow, I never knew I was indoctrinated. I always say to my white folks, I can't wait till you guys wake up and get mad. Wow, I've been lied to this whole time? Really? I'm not superior? We're all the same. And we all have the opportunities and access. Wow. Life would be much different. And I have some very amazing white allies in my network who have woken up and are doing the due diligence and the work that is required. And I have a lot of people of color, people from the LGBTQ plus community, accessibility. I mean, everybody who falls underrepresented, anyone who falls under our laws. I mean, we need to look out for each other. We need to understand where these ideologies come from, where these lenses come from, and how we can combat those lenses. It's an everyday journey. So guys, that's my time. Here's my resources page. Okay. Tune into Imana Borena Inc. Black and Beautiful Chit Chat Connections every Sunday at 8 p.m. Season 1 is almost over, guys. I just thank you so much for spending some time with us. Like I said, in the description box below, our link tree is there. All of our social media sites are available to you. Our website, you can contact us if you have any questions. Please like, share, subscribe, comment. I mean, let us get through the algorithm so other people are engaging in this conversation as well. I thank you for your time. I hope you guys enjoyed the different format. I think I'm going to start doing this different format moving forward, unless I have a guest. I want you guys to be able to see the words. I want you to be able to see the definitions that I have. And once again, like I said, www.imanaborena.org. You can get some professional coaching. I do organizational coaching. I also do college access and success coaching. We have an e-course coming your way. A resource page is coming your way so that you can have access to all the material that I am presenting to you here. So I thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Having a wonderful, wonderful evening. It's cozy out there for us on the East Coast. But for those of you who are on the West Coast, lucky you. You probably have on a jean jacket. And everyone all around the world, if you get a chance to watch this, I thank you for tuning in May God bless you. Heaven smile upon you. We're here for righteousness. We're here for equity. God bless, guys.